Good evening, and welcome. The country has waited with bated breath for years. It is D-Day. It is D-Day for Cartel versus the King. Thank you very much for joining us on Global Television special coverage this evening in Cartel versus the King. It is indeed deadline day, and wherever it goes, it is the end of the matter in the criminal trial for Vibes Cartel. But throughout the whole of this, we centered our arguments and opinion always around Vibes Cartel and whether the decision will go in Vibes Cartel favor. Good evening, and thank you all for joining us. But this evening, I want to ask, what about Lizard's mother if this ruling goes in Cartel favor? Would it be that Lizard's mother is left without justice? And what would be the Jamaican justice system search for justice in the case of providing justice for Lizard's parent and family? Or will the Jamaican justice system just left it flat on the floor? Will the Jamaican justice system, am I getting an echo? Will the Jamaican justice system receive a slap in the face this evening from the Privy Council? The Privy Council link is up and ready. Within an hour, the justices will emerge. And within an hour of them sitting, we should have the decision whether Cartel and his co-accused defendants will walk from the general penitentiary, or they will have to serve the time given to them by the Jamaican justice system. The People's National Party said time has come, but for justice, the justice that Cartel has long searched for, today has finally come and will be delivered by the highest judicial bench in the Commonwealth, the British Privy Council. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Like and share the live, please, because we are going to do our wonder and ponder while we await the sitting of the justices. We will continue to keep our eye on the Privy Council link, as you can see at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Sorry, and as soon as the justices appear, we will close our beak and listen to open justice. But what you will see today won't be described as justice done, but justice seen as being done. The issue in the Vibes Cartel case, the justices are not concerned with whether they've committed the offense or not. There are two issues that the justices are concerned with. And it's one, the gathering of evidence from his mobile phone, and whether that breaches his constitutional rights guaranteed by the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom. That is one of the issues they're focused on. The other issue the Privy Council is concerned with is the the one that a lot of us saw played out in the Privy Council is the issue to do with juror bribery. And on that issue, particularly, it's the one that I'm hinging my prediction on, that the justices will struck down the ruling of the Jamaican trial judge upheld by the Jamaican Superior Appeal Court. The appellants in this case are Sean Campbell, Adija Palmer, Kahiri Jones, and Andre St. John. The respondent, of course, is King Charles, the monarch. The justices are Lord Reed, a justice that I've read about a lot at law school, Lord Lloyd Jones as well, Lord Biggs, Lord Browse. I'm quite much aware of those justices, not much about Lady Simler, but they are the justices I've always read their judgment. But we are waiting with bated breath as the country and the diaspora, the Gaza camp has been. And as soon as the justices are ready, we will definitely be broadcasting. But good evening to those on YouTube and on the X. This evening we're broadcasting on YouTube, on Global Television, and of course we're also broadcasting on our sister channel, Forbes Legal Opinion TV, as well as we're broadcasting on Global Television X. Thank you all for joining us on those various platforms. Thanks to everyone on the live, to everyone in the chat. Good evening and welcome. Please like and share. We've got a little time to go. If anyone wants to join a pre-debate before the justices sit, I will put the link in the top of the chat. And if you are interested in having your say and your opinion before the justices sit, you can do so, but there is limited time as we await the decision of the Privy Council. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Good evening to all my moderators. Good evening to all my family members. Good evening to the community of Parity, my community. Good evening. Good evening to David Jervis. Good evening to Patricia Matthews. Good evening and welcome. Elaine Turner, good evening and welcome. Sophie Moore, good evening and welcome. Good evening, Sunshine. Good evening, Head Teacher K. Good evening. Welcome to the sit down. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Beulah, good evening and welcome. VM, good evening. Beat and Teach, good evening. Cousin Jamie, how are you? Good evening. Sim, how are you? Good evening and welcome. Michelle Lewis Wilson's got gifts. Good evening. Good evening, Natalia Freeman. Good evening and welcome. How are you? BCA Smith. Good evening. Dion Battis. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Yvonne Johnson. Good evening and welcome. Lihana. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Noreen Robinson. Good evening. Patricia Matthews. Good evening. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Rosemary Samuels. Good evening. Good evening, Lilith Foster. Good evening and welcome. VM. Good evening. Odette Morgan. Good evening and welcome. Phyllis Barrett. Good evening and welcome. OPPS Official. Good evening and welcome. Lilith Foster. Good evening and welcome. Chevenese Jackson. Rather, good evening and welcome. BCA Smith. Good evening. Mamat Smith. Good evening and welcome. Colleen Stewart. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Noreen Dennison, good evening and welcome. Good evening, Carlene Stewart, good evening and welcome. So-called David, good evening and welcome. Good evening, yes, good evening. Head Teacher K, good evening. Good evening, Mary Messenger TV, good evening and welcome. Velma Hall, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Amoy, good evening. Annie Jones, good evening. Dorothy White, good evening. Sandra Peart, good evening. No, sorry, Sharon Peart, good evening and welcome. Good evening, good evening. Virginia Jackson, good evening and welcome. Sharon, good evening and welcome. John, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Like and share the live, please. Good evening and welcome. Sasha Lewis, Liebert Peart. Good evening and welcome. Voice of Reason. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, Amoy. Good evening, DJ Saduki. Good evening and welcome. Beulah, good evening. Arlene Foster, good evening. How are you? Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Good evening. Dion Campbell. I know there's a Dibert Campbell. Good evening and welcome. As well as good evening and welcome, Dion Campbell. I know you're always listening. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Do you have an opinion on where the decision go, or is it something that you care about or not? Elm Wilson. Put Cartel aside. Put Cartel and his co-defendant aside. If we're going to have a justice system that doesn't observe the procedures of justice as well as observing the law, even if the person is guilty and you cannot come up with the evidence to prove the person's guilt, and you can't botch the evidence to secure conviction. Where Carlos there? Carlos, you there? Good evening and welcome. And you can botch the evidence to secure a conviction. Not only that it is not safe for those who may have committed the crime. Let us read. Good evening and welcome. But in a corrupt justice system, it is not safe for any of us. Mr. Lane Love, good evening and welcome. It is not safe for any of us. Where Anthony are there? I think he might go soon come, man. Anthony are probably busy, but Anthony are soon come. It is not safe for none of us if we're left with the justice system. Jessica Browse, good evening and welcome. Rena, good evening and welcome. If we're left with the justice system where our investigators or prosecutors and our judiciary can botch the evidence, botch the procedure, botch the entire trial or most of it in order to secure a conviction full swing. Good evening and welcome. One that they could not prove evidentially in court without botching the evidence, even for somebody who may have JamaicanTV.com committed the crime and you cannot prove it, it is not safe for all of us. Cynthia B, good evening and welcome. It is not safe for all of us if that is the justice system we're left with. Ton of flavor. Good evening and welcome. If that is the justice system, we're cousin Marina then. She's probably busy, but she's soon come. If that is the justice system that we will be left with, God help a lot and most of us. Angela 48349, good evening and welcome. How are you? Wayne Evans, good evening and welcome. Janet McIntosh, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. So this is an important case, not just for Cartel and his co-accused, but it's an important case for our justice system and for all of us. Protecting our fundamental rights and protecting the procedures and rule of law is important in a corrupt society. I am Shelley. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. So it is very important that if justice was botched, if it was shoddy, if justice was stitched up, if it was cooked up, then it ought to be struck down because it is not safe for the broader population. Make it make sense. Stevie, good evening and welcome. Colin Stewart, good evening and welcome. Justice Nadine Simpson, good evening and welcome. The standard of criminal law is that you prove the prosecutor responsibility. The burden on the prosecutor is to prove beyond reasonable doubt that X or Y has done the crime. X or Y doesn't have to open their mouth or say anything. It is how the legal system works. In America, you can call you call what is pleading the fifth. So it is the prosecutor's duty to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Cartel and his co-accused committed the crime. But what the prosecutor and the investigator ought not to do is to botch the investigation procedure or the trial procedure, Yvonne Green. Good evening and welcome. In order to secure a conviction. No, they're not allowed to do that. If they were allowed to do that, none of us in a corrupt justice system, in a tribal political partisan system, would not be safe. Such a system could easily be used against political opponents. So on the broader picture of this trial, take the Cartel and his co-defendant out of it, but look at the broader picture of justice for the entire country. Look at the broader picture of justice for us in a country where a government can use state of emergencies and zones of special operations to violate your constitutional right. There's nothing in the law that allows them to violate your constitutional or fundamental right in order to secure a prosecution against you. There's a legal principle that says it's better for 1,000 guilty men to walk than one innocent man is sent to prison. And that's why justice, the system of justice, as long as the law, there is a system that is called procedural law. It's something everybody do at law school. You have the civil procedure rules, where once you have a practice law, or if you want to study it by choice, it's one of the for most universities, it's one of the units you can choose at final year. Civil procedure and criminal procedure is two principles of law you have to study also, because you have to follow the criminal procedure rules applies from the very time the police stop you up until conviction and sentencing. There are particular rules, step by step, Nadine Douglas, in the criminal procedure rules that ought to be followed. For example, a police stopping you, detaining you, detain you and take you into for questioning, question you, start questioning you on the street, but have not read you your rights. In the US, you call it your Miranda rights. In Britain, we call it right to silence. Forgot what they call it again. But you have the right to silence. Anything you said may be given in evidence, something like that. I forget the right phrase. But if the police has not read that to you, before questioning you, your lawyer is going to have that case struck out because the officer violated your rights by not cautioning you. In Britain, we call it a caution. In America, you say your Miranda rights. Steph, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Agent Sajaba 5, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Our veteran Anthony Arden, I may not see them come yet. Good evening and welcome. John, good evening. I don't want to miss anyone you see. Thank you all for joining us. So just by the police stopping you and questioning you and not read your caution, not cautioning you before questioning you, Dorothy Elliott, good evening. That alone can, anything, any part of that becomes admissible. Florence Hamilton, Empress Toya, good evening and welcome. That alone makes the evidence from the police questioning become inadmissible, and that alone can throw the whole case. So from the time the police stop you, the criminal procedure rule start to apply. Felines, good evening and welcome. And it goes right up onto conviction and sentencing. And every one of those particular rules have to be followed. Failure to follow any one of those rules, you open up a ground for appeal on the ground that you erred the law. In some appeal, you go for, you hear the phrase, Joy Johnson, good evening and welcome. You erred the law, or you made an error in the law. Error in the law is aware that this ought to be observed, or I ought to take this into consideration, and I turn a blind eye to it. You erred the law. You failed to take something into consideration that you should have. Audrey Robinson, good evening and welcome. When you make an error in law, Eve, good evening and welcome, is where you applied the law wrongly. So if you don't follow those particular procedures, you're opening up for the case to be struck down by the trial judge, or if it does go ahead with trial, it easily opens up grounds for appeal. So that is why there are particular procedures that have to be followed, such as the evidence gathering, which is one of the issues in this case that the Privy Council is asked to look at. The evidence gathering from, I think, Cartel's mobile phone and the way they went about with the CD-ROM from his telephone provider. Mel, good evening and welcome. The other issue, which that is what will form the flagrant breach, if that's what the Privy Council finds, is the jury bribery. Not only that the jury bribery is serious, but is that the prosecution, Young Donor Mama Foundation, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome. Or judiciary and or prosecutor, well aware of the system, because we heard in the Privy Council that Paula was summoned for her opinion on the issue of the jury bribery when it was failing, because before that came up, the first juror that came off the case was the lady who had her son in prison and went to visit her, and one of the co-defendants recognized her, Anika Hope. Good evening and welcome. So the judge allowed her to come off the case and then it came down to 11 jurors. Then the juror bribery came up. Rosa D, good evening and welcome. Then the juror bribery came up. There's loads of balancing of exercise comes into hand here because they have gone for very long in the case. Replacing that juror, if you don't have backroom jurors that are keeping up with the case, would make it complicated for a juror coming on this late, making a fair and informed decision. What the Jamaican justice system may have been looking at, and it's your Samuel, good evening and welcome, is how expensive it is going to be if I have to remove this juror and collapse the trial and have to restart all over again. It's going to be too expensive. Now, this would where they have gone wrong by putting a price on justice. You cannot do that. Monica Hawthorne, good evening and welcome. You cannot do that. You cannot put a price on justice. Someone have joined the studio. I have problem pronouncing your name. Help me to pronounce your name, please. Good evening and welcome to Global Television. Jolenis, good evening. Hello. I don't think they're ready to speak. So the whole of this system is a historic event for our Jamaican justice system. This is a historic event for our Jamaican justice system because we will know. Cousin Myrna, good evening and welcome. How are you? Kemi XVO, XVEVO, good evening and welcome. Vivo. Kemi XVEVO, good evening and welcome. Thanks for joining us. Cousin Myrna, good evening and welcome. How are you? Isilda Williams, how are you doing? Lilith Lockerbie, good evening and welcome. Hello. Right, if you're joining the studio and you want to speak, you have to unmute your mic. I'm not able to hear you unless you mute your mic. You should only try to join the studio if you want to speak about the issue. Good evening, Karen Forbes. Karen Forbes is my brother. Good evening and welcome, Nifty friends. Good evening and welcome. You should only join the studio if you have an opinion or you want to speak about the judgment we are awaiting in the Vibes Cartel versus the King. Otherwise, we will ban you from the studio if you repeatedly enter and refuse to speak. Thank you very much. But while we continue to wait, what is this going to be if the judgment goes in favor of Vibes Cartel? What would this be for Lizard's family? What would this be for Lizard's family? Would this be where justice ends for them? Or does the Jamaican investigator and the justice system have to go on a new search for justice? That's one of the questions that is going to come forth. Sorry, take a sip of my coffee. Head teacher K is saying justice will not be served. For Lizard, you are talking head teacher K. Chanel Williams. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Does it mean that justice will never be done for Lizard's family? Some people are still of the view Wellness warrior Sophie, good evening. Is Lizard really dead? Because there's no body, there's no form of DNA to suggest that, unlike what um, Fitzbailey is telling us in the Donnelly case, that they have blood DNA to provide that prove that Donnelly died in that apartment. RJ, good evening and welcome. Some people are still asking the question, is Lizard dead? Is he really alive? Or is it just a part of the stitch up to take Cartel down? It is not an opinion I'm performing. It's a question that a lot of people have been asking, or a lot of argument people have been advancing over the years. But today, all of this, within the next 35 minutes, the justice will start sitting. And all of this, within an hour and a half, will come to a head. Whether Cartel and his co-accused defendants will have to serve out the time given by the Jamaican justice system, or will Cartel and his co-defendant walk this evening by dinner time from the general penitentiary? And if they walk, should Paula also walk? Can Paula continue ahead of our prosecutorial system if a flagrant breach violate Watson, Norman Ferguson, sorry, good evening and welcome. Valerie Dennis, good evening and welcome. If a flagrant breach comes out of this ruling this evening, Marlon Palmer, good evening and welcome. If a flagrant breach comes out of the ruling this evening, what does this say for our justice system on a broad scope? What does this say about our justice system? Questions will be asked. It's Brianna, good evening and welcome. Kirk Edwards, good evening. Questions will be asked as to whether how much of our young men in our prison system in Jamaica got a fair trial in court. How much of our young men in the prison system in Jamaica, procedurally, their trial were botched in order to secure a conviction? Marvine Brian, good evening and good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us. It's 3:27 in London. In 33 minutes, the Privy Council should start their sitting. As soon as the Privy Council start to sit, like and share the live. Let me start quarreling now, sir. You can't hear chat for so. So much on the day and I like the live. No, man. Be busy with your fingers over here. Be busy with your fingers this evening, because what we're going to witness this evening, is open justice. Justice, whichever way it goes, that will seem to be done unheard. Because Cartel and his co-accused are not the only ones in this issue seeking justice. The family of Lizard also want justice. If Lizard is dead, because the Jamaican state has not proven that Lizard is dead. If Lizard is dead, Lizard family also deserve justice. Trisha Dem Music 876, good evening and welcome. Jalab Entertainment, welcome back. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Like and share the live, please, so our broadcast can go out there more. Thank you all very much. Like and share the live, please. Within the next half an hour, the Privy Council should start their sitting. And what we will witness this evening is an open display of justice. An open display of justice we will observe this evening. And there will be many opinions and many debates going forward from whatever the ruling is this evening in the Vibes Cartel versus the King, or rather, the correctly cited case is Sean Campbell and others versus the King. That's the real citation. There will be particular numbers attached to the citation after it's been handed down for those in the legal academia and those of us at law school doing our research. So there will be a particular number attached to that case. The 2024 is already attached representing the year. There is a particular other number that will attach to that case when it is reported. But this is a historic moment in our justice system. It's a case that has gone on. Ooh, what's that? It's a case that has gone on for quite a long time in our justice system. It is a very high profile celebrity at home and in the diaspora. So it's a very historic case in our justice system. And if it goes in cartel favor this evening, what that will do, Jasper the Asperger, sorry, I have pronunciation problem with some names. This will open a lot of debate. And given that we are also in a constitutional reform, where we're aiming to remove the monarch and by extension would remove the Privy Council, do we have enough assurance that the Caribbean Court of Justice can uphold the standard of the Privy Council when it comes to guardrailing what is our corrupt justice system in Jamaica? Tada Charlie, good evening and welcome. Tada Charlie. Because if the cartel case comes up with flagrant breach, miscarriage of justice, unsafe conviction, it opens up a range of argument and questions around our constitutional reform and going republic, and whether our last resort of appeal will be the Jamaican Supreme Court, or will we have a chance, Amazing Grace? Will we have a chance to visit, to be member of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and can we rely on them to keep our justice system in Jamaica in check? It is very important. If flagrant breaches comes out of this ruling and it goes in cartel favor, it opens up a whole, Jeff Walt, good evening and welcome. It opens up a whole line of civil suit, which the state of Jamaica, you the taxpayer, will have to pick up some very hefty legal bills. Alton Morris, good evening and welcome. Do you have an opinion on the cartel ruling we're awaiting? Hello? The purpose of the link in the top of the chat is if you have an opinion on the Vibes Cartel issue and the awaited ruling, and you want to give your opinion about that, that's the purpose of the link in the top of the chat. Otherwise, if you do not have an opinion with regards to that, you just communicate within the chat area. The link is just for people. It's a way of, rather than taking phone calls, I give people the opinion to have the option to have their say that way rather. So that's the purpose of the link in the top of the chat. If you have an opinion on the Vibes Cartel issue and the decision we're awaiting, then you can hit the link and enter the studio. Always observing. Good evening and welcome. How are you? Wayne Evans, how are you? Good evening and welcome. Then you hit the link in the top of the chat and enter the studio. Otherwise, you can comment in the comment area. But we are 25 minutes or so away. The link we are observing on the screen in your top right-hand corner there, Michelle Johnson. Good evening and welcome. We are observing the screen of the Privy Council in your top right-hand corner. As soon as they go live, what beat and teach? As soon as they go live, we will shut our beak and then we will bring the screen down for you so you have a front seat view of open justice at the highest bench in the Commonwealth. I should put up a poll, should I? I don't know. Hold on there. Kishore Fulton, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome. Lenford Wilson, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let me try dance my way through this thing. Hold on. Hold on, bang around there. Remember me, I done so I have to take time with me. So allowed, deny, or retrial. I hope my spelling right, can remember me a capital dons. What do you think the outcome will be? I hope my dunceness don't embarrass me. I've put out a poll. Start voting and let's see what your opinion are. Ubuntu, good evening and welcome. How are you? Thank you for joining us. So allowed mean that cartel will walk. Deny mean that he will have to serve his time. Retrial mean the justices will remit his case to the Jamaican justice system for a retrial with a new set of jury, a new set of prosecutor and judge, and a whole new set of expense and time. Will the justices put that as an option, or will the justices go for a retrial based on that the original evidence would have cited guilt to them, but it must be done over using the correct procedure? So even though my prediction G Money, good evening and welcome. Jamar Allen, good evening and welcome. Rena, good evening and welcome. Lilith Foster. Like and share the live, please, people. Like and share the live. Share the live to your WhatsApp group. Share the live to your Facebook account. Share the live to your friend and family and say, even if one don't like him, come and watch, just observe justice for yourself. This is not about Vibes Cartel and his co-defendant. It is about whether our justice system, it is whether about our justice system can deliver justice to us, can deliver justice to us in a fair, open, and balanced way. It is really what this case is about. Whatever you're feeling of cartel is about, or your feeling of lizard is about, focus on the overall picture. Carol Thompson, good evening and welcome. Calm the set Hunt, good evening and welcome. Good evening, thank you for joining us. Shauna Chin, good evening and welcome. Thank you. Sean Chin, rather. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. So wherever this goes, it will be the final decision in the criminal matter. But this is about upholding justice and rule of law in our justice system rather than upholding for Cartel and his co-defendant. Because if there's a flagrant breach and this is allowed to stand, this will set a precedent for our judicial system. Daniel Lawrence, good evening and welcome. This would set a precedent for our justice system that you can butch your way through a trial. You can stitch up the procedures of justice in order to secure a conviction. And I don't think the Privy Council, if that is their finding, will allow that to stand. Nor do I think the Privy Council will want to send back such a high-profile case in a corrupt system which will last a whole another long time and an awful lot of money. So with bated breath, we have been waiting. We're only 18 minutes away. We are only 18 minutes away from this observation, but we will take a quick break and we will resume shortly.
And them a sell out the beach. Yeah, for me again.
Hold on. Hold on, people. Yeah, they're just doing their mic testing at the Privy Council, so that's why I put them on pause until the public hearing is ready. Then I can bring them their link back to the screen, but they are doing their mic check at the moment, so I've put them on I put them on mute. Sorry. I put them on mute, and as soon as they've opened the camera, I will bring the link right down to you. But we are observing. We are observing. The sitting is due to start in 15 minutes. But we want to give them privacy until their screen has gone live. Then we will bring it on screen to you. We want to keep that out of the public until they are ready to open their camera to the public. But thank you all very much for joining us and being here. Millie McBean, good evening and welcome. Supas JPC, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us on this or special coverage this evening on Global Television. Rosalie Ricketts, good evening. Ro Reed, good evening and welcome. Like and share the live, please. Carlene Marks, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. We are awaiting the Privy Council's sitting. As soon as the Privy Council turn their camera on, they were just doing their mic check. As soon as they turn their camera on, we will make sure we shut our beak and bring everything live and direct to you. So please bear with us while you continue to like and share the program so more people can come on and also see the open display of justice, one that will be settling a lengthy criminal battle. Rodney Reed, good evening and welcome. One that will settle a lengthy criminal case in our history this evening. The ruling that will be handed down by the Privy Council. The ruling that will be handed down this evening by the Privy Council will settle the matter, settle the criminal matter in the case of Sean Campbell and others versus the King / the state of Jamaica. If this goes in the favor of Vybz Kartel and his co-accused, this will open up a lengthy legal challenge, a lengthy civil challenge, especially if it goes down as miscarriage of justice or breach of one's fundamental rights protected by the Charter. The state of Jamaica, you the taxpayer, will be picking up what is a hefty legal bill. A hefty legal bill the state of Jamaica would have to pick up. And I'm wondering if the state of Jamaica is going to play a fool on this and waste more money of the people of Jamaica defending such a lawsuit, which, if the ruling comes as a flagrant breach, a miscarriage of justice, the government advisable should settle, because what you will do is wasting an awful lot of state money in a legal challenge that you will not win. Like and share the live, please. Otherwise, may I go just tap pound and just turn off my voice, just like how I turn off on a finger. Give us some like and share, please. Take us up to how much honor there? Let me see how much honor there. Take us up to what have I done? Take us up to some 500 likes, please. Get your fingers busy. Take us up to some 500 likes. Oh, we've got 102 people on Twitter. We've got 490 on global television and 170 on Flow TV. Please like the live, whichever platform you are on, please. Thank you very much. This evening, as soon we only have 10 minutes to go. Pauline Dixon, good evening and welcome. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Wherever this goes this evening, it ends the criminal matter, but it will start a whole civil claim. It will start a whole rafter of civil claim, one that the state of Jamaica, you, the taxpayer, will have to foot that bill, whatever the court award, if the government doesn't move into a settlement. And especially for cartel, which is so high profile, if it's a miscarriage of justice, in such a lawsuit, you're going to have to pencil in the amount of money that cartel work and the amount of money, the amount of business that he has lost out on. That is one side of the claim. The amount of time for the loss of his liberty. It's a lawsuit that could run into billions, given that it's a lawsuit of 5 people that was seeking compensation and damages. There's many different little things that they can sue for at that point. Loss of earning, loss of liberty, one whole rafter. Counsel Buchanan, good evening. Thank you for your hard work in the interest of justice. Will you be rubbing your hands with glee this evening? Let's see what comes out of the Privy Council. I may, by the time it gets to 5 o'clock in London, I may have to swallow my word, just like Nestor Morgan, who said, as long as me an MP boy, you can't win no seat in a mucko. And had to swallow his words. But if I have to swallow my words this evening for my prediction, I will gladly swallow them, because whether you disagree or agree, whatever the ruling comes out of this, we will all have to respect it as the final decision. Whether you agree or disagree, you have to respect it as the final decision. We are awaiting the imminent arrival of the Privy Council justices. Once they are in sitting, we will shut our beak and allow you a front row seat in the observation of open justice at the highest judicial bench in the Commonwealth. I would like to thank you all for your support on being here this evening. Your support is welcome and amazing, and it's well appreciated. Thank you all for your support. If this is your first time on global television, thank you very much for joining the family. We do mainly lives over here. Sometime now and again, we post videos. We will get into that more, but we mainly do live over here. And we have 3 different programs that we run throughout the day. We have a early program in the UK midday, which is 7 a.m. Eastern time. Olimar Pressful, good morning, good evening, and welcome, which is called the At a Glance program. That goes out at 12 noon UK time, 7 a.m. Eastern time. Jamaican Vibes Adventure, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Also, we have our second program for the day, which is called Drive Time London, Lunchtime Global, the Easy Jerk World. What's up, bro? Good evening and welcome. Shauna Smith. Cousin Jay, Wagwan. Me I shout you out for a morning, but me know you're busy sometime. Wagwan, welcome. Me know you just a come from sunshine and good food, so you're all right. I want me to explain again. When the member said me, oh yes, I was explaining the programs. Let me quickly finish in. So the second program is Drive Time London, Lunchtime Global. That goes out at 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Noel Williams, good evening and welcome. And then the final program goes out at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 11 p.m. UK time, and that is our People's Point of View program. So once you're subscribed to Global Television, you will get our notification once we put our link out for our live show. Veteran, good evening, big up and welcome. We are only 3 minutes away from the Privy Council opening up their camera. Once they do so, we will bring the screen right down into your face, Baron Muir. Good evening and welcome. And allow you to observe justice front row. Arlene Forrest, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. We are awaiting the imminent arrival of the Privy Council. Once the Privy Council take center stage, we will bring the screen. Akafari Dixon, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. Like and share the live, please, so everyone can come and have their front seat row of justice right here on Global Television this evening. We're also broadcasting on our Global Television X, as well as we are broadcasting on our sister station, Forbes Legal Opinion Television. Thank you all for joining us. We're 2 minutes away from the cameras coming live in the Privy Council, and we will make sure our camera or link is brought down to the screen so everyone can have their own view, their own listening in to the judgment, and form their opinion by the time the justices have completed their decision this evening. Kat Palmer, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are a minute away. James, Lilith Foster, good evening. Good evening and welcome. We are awaiting the opening of the link. It should come live anytime soon. Carla Singh, good evening and welcome. Diana Actons, good evening, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. We're just keeping an eye. As soon as they're all ready, they will just come forward. Earlier on, they were doing their mic checks. So I'm hoping everything will be ready soon as possible. Thank you all very much for your support and for being here this evening, whichever forum you are on. We are waiting the arrival of the justices. As soon as they are in sitting, we'll bring the screen down to you so everyone can have their own view, listening in and form their own opinion based on the delivered judgment. Josephine Johnson, good evening and welcome. Thank you very much for it's your first time. And Global Television, welcome to the family. Thank you for joining us. We are awaiting the sitting at the Privy Council. We are awaiting sitting at the Privy Council. As soon as the link goes live, we will make sure we bring it to you. Usually they're quite on time. Usually they are on time. Let me see. One second. Usually they are on time. I'm just waiting. I see someone say Mystic Vibe. Mystic Vibe, good evening and welcome to Global Television. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Atlanta Storm, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us this evening on Global Television. Let me refresh this screen. I'm just refreshing the screen to make sure there's no delay on it. Just bear with us, please. Just bear with us. We hope there's no technical difficulties at the Privy Council. We hope there's no technical difficulties. Bear with me a second, please. Okay, hold on. They've already started sitting, but the link is not coming out to us.
Was that the mobile phone evidence and telecommunications data, taken as a whole with Chow's evidence,
There seem to be some technical issues going on there. Bear with us, people. There's technical issues going on at the Privy Council here.
For the killing, the method of disposal of the deceased's body, and the identity.
It's nothing on our part, people. I've checked on everybody across social media who is streaming it is having that same problem. It's the link from the Privy Council. I think it's weak. Wow. That's what we're all of us
at least one of the killers, namely Palmer. The four appellants.
We keep refreshing the link, but the problem is on their side. It's the stream on their side seems to doesn't be powerful enough. I wouldn't understand why.
Each denied murdering the deceased. At trial, the appellants objected to the telecommunications data being admitted as evidence. They argued that the data was inadmissible because it had been obtained in breach of the Interception of Communications Act and the Fundamental right to the protection of privacy of communications guaranteed by the Charter of Fundamental Rights and freedoms contained in the Jamaican Constitution. The judge admitted the evidence. He ruled that the data could be relied upon by the prosecution, even
just to keep you informed, it's like this on every platform because the problem is coming from the Privy Council side, not on our end.
even if it had been obtained in breach of the Charter or the interception of communication. Act. Over the course of a 64-day trial, there occurred a series of incidents involving the jury. The jury was reduced to 11 members after a juror was discharged almost 8 weeks into the trial. On the final day of the trial, it was brought to the judge's attention that a member of the jury, who will be referred to as Juror X, had attempted to bribe other members of the jury. The judge questioned the jury forewoman, who stated that Juror X had offered bribes to each of the other jurors to acquit the appellants. The judge asked counsel for the prosecution and the defense if the trial could continue. It would not have been possible only to discharge Juror X, because under the Jury Act, a trial for murder cannot continue with fewer than 11 jurors. The judge decided to proceed with his summing up and gave a direction to the jury, reminding them of their function. The jury retired to consider its verdict.
People, let me try and open another stream because everybody's telling me it's my side, but every link I open, I'm getting the same buffering. Hold on. Oh gosh. I don't know what happened because I couldn't hear anything. Hold on. Well, the decision, I'm told, people, is that Cartel has won his appeal, or Link went really off key. I'm very sorry about that. Or Link went off key, but Cartel conviction has been quashed. One second. I'm really sorry for this messed up this evening. We have waited for this so long and it did not go down well for us. But the decision, I'm told, that came down is that the appeal is allowed. I will have to go back to the dead stream and restream because I want to hear the ruling myself. Judgment PDF. Let me go into the PDF judgment. Quickly, please bear with me. But if because I didn't hear everybody saying so many different things, let me go to the PDF judgment here. Hold on. I am so annoyed by this. Hold on. Let me go all the way to the bottom of the page. Conclusion. For the reasons set out above, the board will humbly advise the magistrate that the appellant conviction should be quashed, and the question whether there should be a retrial should be remitted to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica. So the conviction is quashed. The question opens whether there should be a retrial. So the conviction has been quashed. The question is whether should there be a retrial remitted to the so let me see what they say on retrial here. Section 14, subsection 2 of the Judicature Act, Appellate Jurisdiction Act permitted a retrial where a conviction is quashed if that is in the interest of justice. The board possess to follow in this case its usual practice of remitting to the local court the question whether retrial should be ordered. Okay, so this is the understanding. The conviction, Vybz Kartel conviction, is quashed by the Privy Council. The question is, the justices said, the question must go to the Jamaica Appellate Court. The question must go to the Jamaica Appellate Court as to whether Vybz Kartel and his co-defendants should be remitted for a new trial. So paragraph 63 and paragraph 64 of the judgment is 18 pages. Paragraph 63 is where they dealt with the issue of retrial should the case go back to retrial. The justices of the Privy Council is not making a decision on that. They are handing that decision over to the Jamaican justice system, the Jamaican Senior Appellate Court, to make that decision. But as for the conviction, paragraph 64, which is the conclusion, quashes the conviction for all the appellants. So therefore, this open up, I will need further guidance on this, whether because of this question, if they automatically become free. But I'm sure ISAT will answer that question as a practitioner later on. But yes, it is quashed, but there is the quash retrial. So it's not all over. Believe you me, it's not all over. Why do I say no? Why? Yes, it's going. I should think so. Let me clear up my understanding. If they're to go to a retrial, what the evidence? I have not read the complete judgment. It's important to read the judgment to see what the justice's opinion are on the two issues that they were looking at. The tampering of evidence to do with his what you call it? His the evidence retrieved from his mobile phone. As well as the issue of juror tampering. So that in itself, will not with the juror tampering, I will have to understand their argument on it. One, after understanding their argument on that, then it's where one would be able to know what is the evidence you're going to order the retrial on. So that will be an important conversation coming out of this ruling. That will be one of the very much important question coming out of that ruling. Young Donor Mama Foundation, Miranda Rudder. But there is implication for our justice system in this ruling because our system got it awfully wrong. Our system got it awfully wrong. And whether, if they cannot manage to mount a retrial, if the evidence they have is not enough for them to mount a retrial, then therefore it opens up the lawsuit of this quashed conviction. But over the weekend, I will go through the judgment in its entirety. It's a one-page rule, reason for judgment: 1, juror misconduct, and 2, timing of juror retirement, 3, evidence obtained in breach of charter. So it's on those 3 reasons they have quashed the decision, because there was a juror misconduct, which the court have no regards for. Am I able to read the summary for you? No, man, I tired, you know. When I come back tonight, if you all come back tonight, I'll read through the summary of the judgment with you, so then we can all have a clearer understanding. But Carter's conviction, as I assume, based on the argument that was had in the Privy Council, have been quashed. And it is for the Jamaican Appeal Court. I want to put that something here, man. I want to this. It is for the Jamaican Appeal Court to decide whether to take this case back for a retrial. One would ask, on what evidence? Because if it is quashed on the on this evidence they relied on, if the decision was quashed on those evidence, it would hard to see the Jamaican justice system be able to rely on those very evidence again in a new trial to secure a conviction. I want to make it readable for my eyes. To secure a conviction. So, hold on, please. Let us see, take time, where this all go. Let me see if I can hum through the summary of the judgment for you. And if you remember, say me I done, so wanna bear with me. All right, this is the press release, March 14, 2024. Sean Campbell and Adija Palmer, Kahiri Jones, and St. John's, and Andre St. John's, the appellant. Hold on. Somebody has come into the studio. Anthony Thompson, good evening and welcome to Global Television. Hello? Right. Let me get back to my Galangian. Hold on. Hold on, hold on. Hold on, hold on. Hold on. One second, peeps. Hold on. Can this be the right one? Hold on, let me see. One second. Let me by this evening the dead link should be up so we can re-listen it together. Hold on. Bear with me a second, please. Bear with me a second. Please bear with me a second. No. I want to go through the people. Permit me, please. My eye tired. Yeah. Where's the summary? Tonight, when we come back, we will read through the summary of the judgment together, because it's important to understand why they have come to that reason. I have burned me at this point. What I will also do is to get the link, revisit the link later, and we can rewatch it. In a sense, the Jamaican justice system can answer the question. The Jamaican judges need to answer the question as to whether they are taking the case back for a retrial. The Privy Council remit that question. The Privy Council sent that question back to the Jamaican court. So the Jamaican government will have to make an application in the parlor, embarrassing, botched it up parlor. We should also start calling for Paula Llewellyn's resignation. Botched it up parlor. Botched it up parlor needs to go. Island Breeze, Sonia Ellis. Botched it up parlor needs to go. We should not allow and cannot allow Paula to take a retrial application to the Supreme Court. She have botched this trial so much that will cost expense, no doubt, huge expense to the Jamaican public, to the Jamaican purse, and therefore should not be allowed so the bench is saying, in the view of its conclusion on the issue of juror misconduct, the board holds that it is not necessary to express a conclude view on these grounds of appeal. So that left for them can go back in the Jamaica court, go argue on that rather, based on how this trial, this judgment, so the conviction is quashed on the ground of juror tampering. Hold on. Juror misconduct, rather. And that the case should not be remitted to the Appeal Court of Jamaica to decide, rather to retry. And that, hold on. And that the case should be remitted to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica to decide whether to order a retrial of the appellant for the murder of the deceased. And this, people, is a unanimous judgment. All the justices agree. Now, here is the judicial stitch-up. Here is the judicial stitch-up. You know why the justices didn't rule on the question of retrial? Hey, the justices know that if Paula M. Charles, good evening and welcome. If Paula launched an application in the Jamaican Appeal Court for a retrial of Vybz Kartel and his co-defendant, the evidence will be highly contested as to whether that evidence can secure a conviction, because you can't use the butch evidence. Cannot secure a conviction on that. So the argument that Paula will be taking is more around the juror tampering issue. But having been ruled against unanimously on the issue to do with the evidence gathering, has also ruled against on the juror tampering. But remember, it was the state of Jamaica that was seeking a retrial. The Privilege Council is saying, I'm not answering that. Your appeal court must answer it. And then if they rule in your favor, Isaac Buchanan will have the opportunity to come back to this Privy Council to ask if the Jamaican Court of Appeal made the right decision based on the evidence that there is enough here for us to go for a retrial and secure a safe conviction. And secure a safe conviction. A safe conviction is what matters. It matters that the conviction is safe. Otherwise, them can take anyone away, stitch up the evidence against we. And because we don't have the public notoriety or the money to go on such a lengthy legal challenge, then one wouldn't be able to achieve today an end to the fight, an almost end to the fight for Vibes Cartel and his co-accused in this case. Isaac Buchanan has always been confident. Isaac Buchanan has always been confident of this day and the ruling that would have come out of this day. And I want to say to Isaac Buchanan this evening, thank you very much for your hard work. Thank you very much for your interest in justice. Thank you very much for your pursuit of justice, Rowan Perry. Good evening and welcome. Thank you very much for your pursuit of justice. This botch and shoddy, fling me go hand me come, justice system, corrupt to the core, a slap in the face today and their procedural actions in the rule of law. An embarrassing slap down. And also send you back, go and the conviction from the state of Jamaica is quashed. The Court of Appeal, Travis Parkins, did not answer the question as to whether they are ordering a retrial. The Privy Council is saying the Appeal Court of Jamaica should answer the question with regards to retrial. So Paula Llewellyn will have to submit an application back to the Court of Appeal in Jamaica ordering a retrial. But if the conviction is quashed on the evidence of taken from his mobile phone, you won't be able to rely on that in a new trial. The juror tampering, you could solve that in a new trial. However, one of the main evidence relied on was the evidence gathered in contravention of the Interception Act, which violated his fundamental rights to privacy. So for Paula to go back to the Appeal Court of Jamaica and argue that we have enough evidence here to secure a safe conviction will be a hard thing. It will also open up another appeal case to the Privy Council by ISAC challenging the evidence that they would want to go to retrial on. So it end and it not end. The reason why I'm saying it ends, because I don't think Paula and the state of Jamaica can prove it evidentially, because they could not have proved it evidentially without the botched evidence. They couldn't have secured the conviction without violating the processes that they ought to be followed. So I would like to see the contest in the Jamaican court as to what evidence they are taking on a retrial, and it has to be the same evidence you went to trial on. So on that, one can say it ends, but then you have to wait to see if Paula makes her move. But the call ought to be, can Paula Llewellyn stay? That I don't understand yet. JamaicanTV.com. You all would have to provide me time to read through the judgment. But if the conviction is quashed, I don't think they can hold them on the evidence they have. No, ISAC will have to clarify that. I'm not a practitioner, I'm a legal academic. ISAC will have to give more guidance on that. But I think it should be an automatic release. I do think so, but don't quote me on that. I'll get guidance on that. But the conviction is quashed, and I don't see where the Jamaica state is going to have the evidence if the evidence that the conviction is quashed on a piece of evidence that you highly relied on. So this is why I'm saying, from my thinking, I would want to see the argument that Paula would produce in an application to the Jamaican Appeal Court as to the grounds for a retrial. Or is it? No, it's not a decision that can be made by Paula's office. The question, as the judgment says, must be remitted to the Jamaican Appeal Court to decide to order a retrial of the appellant for murder of the deceased. I don't think that is possible. I don't think that is possible evidentially. Evidentially, I do not think that is possible. But let's see what Paula Llewellyn and Brian Sykes and the government, in order to stagger out a lengthy lawsuit. In order to stagger out a lengthy lawsuit, let's see the game that they will all play here in this, what we've just, in this slap in the face that we've just seen our Jamaican justice system receive this evening at the Privy Council. The Privy Council is saying, you got it horribly wrong. You got it horribly wrong. You put a price on justice. You turn a blind eye to juror tampering. I told you all that on especially the juror tampering issue, they were not going to have it. They were not going to have it, and that leaves our justice system this evening in quite an embarrassing shambles, where the Director of Public Prosecution, ought to resign for the handling of the cartel's case. And I want to say once more, thank you very much, Isaac, for your broader outlook on justice. Thanks for your broader outlook on justice and your fight to secure justice for the broader population rather than just those who have the money and the links to make sure justice is delivered to them. But Vybz Kartel and his co-accused has won the appeal. The Jamaican court, the state of Jamaica, has lost. The state of Jamaica has received a slap in its face. The people of Jamaica will no doubt be picking up the bill for whatever challenges come after. If Paula Llewellyn takes an application to the appeals court to order a retrial in the case of Vybz Kartel and his co-accused, what is the further implications for our system? What will be the evidence that they will be going for a retrial on, given that the Privy Council has just slapped down the breaches of fundamental rights protected by the Jamaican Constitution. This evening is a jubilant evening for the Gaza camp, but it is also a rather depressing evening for the mother of Lizard, because on both sides seeks and deserve justice if injustices were done to them. But will the state of Jamaica pursue justice for Lizard, or because they have treated this case so embarrassingly, will Paula be stuck in her head in the sand like an ostrich and get on with it until it dies down? No, Miss Llewellyn, not so fast. This is a flagrant butchery of our judicial system, one that will leave the country in possibly a lengthy lawsuit or a lucrative settlement for Vibes Cartel and his co-accused. What does this mean for our justice system? How much of our young men are rammed up in our system? Healthy ideas. Good evening and welcome. Antonia Wagwan. Ali Richards, good evening and welcome. But this judgment today, is this judgment telling us that we cannot yet leave the Privy Council? We have to seek more judicial protection. We have to seek more judicial protection from a system that is botched and shoddy and will make sure that they botch justice at all costs in order to achieve their aims. Hold on, please. Hold on a second. All right, we're going to watch the rebroadcast together. It's just a 9-minute. Hopefully, we get our own good listening of it while the stream was not so heartily for us then. Which part me there? Yes, no. Oh, yes, no. Because the stream was not heartily for us then. Let us now listen for ourselves what took place.
Judgment in the matter of Sean Campbell, Adidja Palmer, Kahir Jones, and Andre St. John against the King.
On the 13th of March 2014, following a 64-day jury trial in the Home Circuit Court in Kingston, Jamaica, the appellants, Sean Campbell, Adidja Palmer, Kahira Jones, and Andre St. John, were convicted of the murder of Clive Lizard Williams, to whom I shall refer as the deceased. At trial, the prosecution case was that the deceased and another man, Lema Chow, had been given 2 unlicensed firearms belonging to Palmer for safekeeping. On the 16th of August 2011, Campbell summoned Chow and the deceased to Palmer's house after they had failed to comply with Palmer's deadline for returning the weapons. The prosecution alleged that they were met on arrival by Palmer, Jones, and St. John, and that Chow and the deceased were both attacked, after which Chow saw the deceased lying motionless on the ground with Jones bending over him. Chow escaped, but the deceased was never seen again. Police attended Palmer's house on the 22nd of August 2011. They noticed the house smelled of disinfectant. On the 25th of August, they cordoned off the perimeter wall, treating the premises as a crime scene. When they returned on the 27th of August, they found that the entire interior of the house had been destroyed by fire. On the 29th of August, police forensics reported a foul odor emanating from the living room. On a further visit on the 30th of September, it was discovered that the rear of the house had been demolished. Police dug at the premises but did not find a body. Police seized the mobile phones of Palmer and St. John. Text messages, voice notes, and a video from those phones were put in evidence at trial. The prosecution also relied on telecommunications data which the police had obtained from Digicel, a communications provider. The prosecution case was that the mobile phone evidence and telecommunications data, taken as a whole with Chow's evidence, proved the fact of the killing, the reason for the killing, the method of disposal of the deceased's body, and the identity of at least one of the killers, namely Palmer. The four appellants each denied murdering the deceased. At trial, the appellants objected to the telecommunications data being admitted as evidence. They argued that the data was inadmissible because it had been obtained in breach of the Interception of Communications Act and the fundamental right to the protection of privacy of communications guaranteed by the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms contained in the Jamaican Constitution. The judge admitted the evidence. He ruled that the data could be relied upon by the prosecution even if it had been obtained in breach of the Charter or the Interception of Communications Act. Over the course of a 64-day trial, there occurred a series of incidents involving the jury. The jury was reduced to 11 members after a juror was discharged almost 8 weeks into the trial. On the final day of the trial, it was brought to the judge's attention that a member of the jury, who will be referred to as Juror X, had attempted to bribe other members of the jury. The judge questioned the jury forewoman, who stated that Juror X had offered bribes to each of the other jurors to acquit the appellants. The judge asked counsel for the prosecution and the defense if the trial could continue. It would not have been possible only to discharge Juror X, because under the Jury Act, a trial for murder cannot continue with fewer than 11 jurors. The judge decided to proceed with his summing up and gave a direction to the jury, reminding them of their function. The jury retired to consider its verdict at 3:42 p.m. The jury returned at 6:08 p.m. and by a majority of 10 to 1 convicted all four appellants of the deceased's murder. A fifth defendant was unanimously acquitted. Juror X was immediately arrested and was later convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice. There was no evidence to connect his activities with the appellants. The appellants appealed against their conviction to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica, which dismissed their appeals. The Court of Appeal granted permission to appeal to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council on 3 grounds, which were, first, that the trial judge failed properly to inquire into allegations of juror misconduct. Secondly, that the trial judge departed from standard practice in inviting the jury to retire to consider their verdict so late in the day, putting undue pressure on them to reach a verdict. And thirdly, that the trial judge erred in admitting the telecommunications data because it had been obtained in breach of the Interception of Communications Act and the Charter. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council has unanimously concluded that the appeals should be allowed and the appellant's convictions should be quashed on the ground of juror misconduct, and that the case should be remitted to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica to decide whether to order a retrial of the appellants for the murder of Clive Williams. The board has considerable sympathy with the dilemma faced by the trial judge on the final day of a long and complex trial. Following the allegations of bribery, he had either to continue with the 11 remaining jurors or to discharge the jury. Despite this, the board considers that the approach taken by the judge was a material irregularity in the course of the trial, which makes it necessary to quash the convictions. This is for 3 reasons. First, the direction to the jury on the final day was inadequate to save the situation. The judge simply reminded the jury that they had sworn or affirmed that they would return verdicts in accordance with the evidence they had heard in court. The judge did not refer to the alleged bribery, of which, if the allegations were true, the jurors were already aware. Secondly, the trial continued with the allegedly corrupt juror serving as one of its 11 members. In the board's view, there should have been no question of allowing Juror X to continue to serve on the jury. Allowing Juror X to remain on the jury is fatal to the safety of the convictions which followed. It was an infringement of the appellant's fundamental right to a fair hearing under the Jamaican Constitution. Thirdly, the judge should have considered whether the remaining jurors might have become, consciously or unconsciously, prejudiced for or against one or more of the appellants as a result of Juror X's behavior. For example, there was a danger that the attempted bribe could have made the other jurors overcompensate, consciously or unconsciously, if they assumed that the offer must have come from one of the appellants and that therefore they must be guilty. The judge took no account of this risk. The board is very mindful of the serious consequences which may flow from having to discharge a jury shortly before the end of a long and complex criminal trial. It is also very conscious of the danger of deliberate attempts to derail criminal trials by engineering situations in which it is necessary to discharge the jury. In England and Wales, there is legislation which allows a judge in certain situations to discharge a jury because of jury tampering and to continue the trial by judge alone. There is no such legislation in Jamaica. It follows that there will be occasions where, as in this case, a court will have no alternative but to discharge a jury and end the trial in order to protect the integrity of the system of trial by jury. In view of its conclusion on the issue of juror misconduct, the board holds that it is not necessary to express a concluded view on the other 2 grounds of appeal. For these reasons, the appellant's appeals should be allowed. The court is now adjourned.
Good evening. If you have just joined us, the Privy Council have handed down their decision. One that was expected, freedom for the Gaza camp. If you have not heard or known, Jamaica has now had its own Johnny Cochran in the frame of an Isaac Buchanan. Thank you all very much. You have heard it for yourself. There will be many implications coming out of this ruling for our justice system. Butch it up, DPP. That's the new name going forward. Butch it up, DPP. Butch it up, Brian Sykes. Brian Sykes is one who is calling for juror abandonment in our system. Where will the debate for justice go in our country? How much more young men will want to challenge their conviction at the Privy Council? Is it safe to go the Republic route at the moment, given the butch and shoddy? Charmaine, Chris Holmes, good evening and welcome. James, good evening. Good evening to late herbalist. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining us. If you have just joined Global Television, Mac City, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining and thanks for your support this evening, Beverly Hall. Good evening and welcome. We have just heard and observed open justice for ourselves. We've seen the Jamaican justice system receive a slap in the face this evening, Devon Davis, that they did not do their work properly. They failed to follow due processes. And by that, they have breached Vibes Cartel and his co-accused fundamental rights, as well as having disregard, even though the Privy Council have a bit of sympathy on the trial judge at the late point that the jury tampering, the jury misconduct debacle came up in the trial. But in the interest of justice, because what this has also done, if justice were to be served for Lizard, then it's an even much harder road now. But let's see if an application, Peggy Reed, let's see if an application, Denise Hall, from the state of Jamaica will go to the Jamaica appeal court with regards to the argument of a retrial. With regards to Cartel and his co-accused being released this evening, I will have to take guidance on that matter. I won't be saying much on that. I should clear that up for us, or we listened into the Jamaican media to see what will be coming out. But I think because the conviction is quashed, then there should be bail until such an application. But as I said to you, these are technical practicing area. Isaac Buchanan is the best person to have a view on such, and I'm sure during his program this evening, he's going to be clearing up any misunderstanding that myself and anyone is having. Santano Griffiths, good evening and welcome. So this, we would hope, is the end of the criminal matter in the Vibes Cartel versus the King. But as we are understanding, the Privy Council has submitted back to the Jamaican Supreme Court to answer the question as to whether Vibes Cartel, Zion Apostolic H&D, good evening, Dwayne Daly, good evening and welcome. CC, good evening and welcome. It's now for the Jamaica Court of Appeal to answer the question as to whether Vibes Cartel and his co-defendants or co-accused at the moment, because the conviction has been quashed, and his co-accused should be remitted to a retrial in the Jamaica court. And one would ask the question, on what evidence? So this matter is not over. King Media Rattigam, good evening and welcome to Global Television. This matter is not over as we would want it to happen. I'm hoping Isaac Buchanan can clear up the remittal for us this evening, and if that prevents Vibes Cartel being released. I'm not able to monitor any of the Jamaican media at the moment to hear the conversation as to whether the automatic release applied for bail or Paula Llewellyn is going to make an emergency application for retrial and to the Supreme Court. To the Jamaican Appeal Court, RG. Good evening and welcome, Natalie Douglas, Kenisha Hamilton. Good evening and welcome. Whether Paula Llewellyn is going to submit an emergency application to the appeals court, and if they're not, then I think it should be an automatic release because the conviction is quashed. But as I said to you, I will take counsel from ISAT when he's on his show this evening. I'm sure ISAT will be giving a lot of clarity. Rodney Box, good evening and welcome. And if you're just joining us, Jamaica has now had its own Johnny Cochran in the form of an ISAT Buchanan. This is a historic day for justice in our country. If there is a flagrant breach of your constitutional, human, or fundamental rights, in order to secure a conviction, the Privy Council is saying, we will not have it. This is not the right way to go. You cannot bend the rule of justice to achieve justice, is what the Privy Council is saying to us this evening. So the state of Jamaica, the judiciary have questions to answer to themselves whether we have enough evidence in this case to mount on a trial, to achieve a safe conviction. Can Paula Llewellyn prove that evidentially without using botched evidence? Can Paula Llewellyn? No, sir, it could be like foreign TV. Foreign TV wouldn't play this over and over for you for the whole day, because this is a historic day and a historic judgment. If you have not seen the ruling for yourself, take another look.
Judgment in the matter of Sean Campbell, Adidja Clonlad, Cahir Jervis, and Andre St. John against the King.
On the 13th of March 2014, following a 64-day jury trial in the Home Circuit Court in Kingston, Jamaica, the appellants, Sean Campbell, Adidja Palmer, Kahira Jones, and Andre St. John, were convicted of the murder of Clive Lizard Williams, to whom I shall refer as the deceased. At trial, the prosecution case was that the deceased and another man, Lema Chow, had been given two unlicensed firearms belonging to Palmer for safekeeping. On the 16th of August 2011, Campbell summoned Chow and the deceased to Palmer's house after they had failed to comply with Palmer's deadline for returning the weapons. The prosecution alleged that they were met on arrival by Palmer, Jones, and St. John, and that Chow and the deceased were both attacked, after which Chow saw the deceased lying motionless on the ground with Jones bending over him. Chow escaped, but the deceased was never seen again. Police attended Palmer's house on the 22nd of August 2011. They noticed the house smelled of disinfectant. On the 25th of August, they cordoned off the perimeter wall, treating the premises as a crime scene. When they returned on the 27th of August, they found that the entire interior of the house had been destroyed by fire. On the 29th of August, police forensics reported a foul odor emanating from the living room. On a further visit on the 30th of September, it was discovered that the rear of the house had been demolished. Police dug at the premises but did not find a body. Police seized the mobile phones of Palmer and St. John. Text messages, voice notes, and a video from those phones were put in evidence at trial. The prosecution also relied on telecommunications data which the police had obtained from Digicel, a communications provider. The prosecution case was that the mobile phone evidence and telecommunications data, taken as a whole with Chow's evidence, proved the fact of the killing, the reason for the killing, the method of disposal of the deceased's body, and the identity of at least one of the killers, namely Palmer. The four appellants each denied murdering the deceased. At trial, the appellants objected to the telecommunications data being admitted as evidence. They argued that the data was inadmissible because it had been obtained in breach of the Interception of Communications Act and the fundamental right to the protection of privacy of communications guaranteed by the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms contained in the Jamaican Constitution. The judge admitted the evidence. He ruled that the data could be relied upon by the prosecution even if it had been obtained in breach of the Charter or the Interception of Communications Act. Over the course of a 64-day trial, there occurred a series of incidents involving the jury. The jury was reduced to 11 members after a juror was discharged almost 8 weeks into the trial. On the final day of the trial, it was brought to the judge's attention that a member of the jury, who will be referred to as Juror X, had attempted to bribe other members of the jury. The judge questioned the jury forewoman, who stated that Juror X had offered bribes to each of the other jurors to acquit the appellants. The judge asked counsel for the prosecution and the defense if the trial could continue. It would not have been possible only to discharge Juror X, because under the Jury Act, a trial for murder cannot continue with fewer than 11 jurors. The judge decided to proceed with his summing up and gave a direction to the jury, reminding them of their function. The jury retired to consider its verdict at 3:42 p.m. The jury returned at 6:08 p.m. and by a majority of 10-1 convicted all 4 appellants of the deceased's murder. A 5th defendant was unanimously acquitted. Juror X was immediately arrested and was later convicted of attempting to pervert the course of justice. There was no evidence to connect his activities with the appellants. The appellants appealed against their conviction to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica, which dismissed their appeals. The Court of Appeal granted permission to appeal to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council on 3 grounds, which were, first, that the trial judge failed properly to inquire into allegations of juror misconduct. Secondly, that the trial judge departed from standard practice in inviting the jury to retire to consider their verdict so late in the day, putting undue pressure on them to reach a verdict. And thirdly, that the trial judge erred in admitting the telecommunications data because it had been obtained in breach of the Interception of Communications Act and the Charter. The Judicial Committee of the Privy Council has unanimously concluded that the appeals should be allowed and the appellant's convictions should be quashed on the ground of conduct, and that the case should be remitted to the Court of Appeal of Jamaica to decide whether to order a retrial of the appellants for the murder of Clive Williams. The board has considerable sympathy with the dilemma faced by the trial judge on the final day of a long and complex trial. Following the allegations of bribery, he had either to continue with the 11 remaining jurors or to discharge the jury. Despite this, the board considers that the approach taken by the judge was a material irregularity in the course of the trial, which makes it necessary to quash the convictions. This is for 3 reasons. First, the direction to the jury on the final day was inadequate to save the situation. The judge simply reminded the jury that they had sworn or affirmed that they would return verdicts in accordance with the evidence they had heard in court. The judge did not refer to the alleged bribery, of which, if the allegations were true, the jurors were already aware. Secondly, the trial continued with the allegedly corrupt juror serving as one of its 11 members. In the board's view, there should have been no question of allowing Juror X to continue to serve on the jury. Allowing Juror X to remain on the jury is fatal to the safety of the convictions which followed. It was an infringement of the appellant's fundamental right to a fair hearing under the Jamaican Constitution. Thirdly, the judge should have considered whether the remaining jurors might have become, consciously or unconsciously, prejudiced for or against one or more of the appellants as a result of Juror X's behavior. For example, there was a danger that the attempted bribe could have made the other jurors overcompensate, consciously or unconsciously, if they assumed that the offer must have come from one of the appellants and that therefore they must be guilty. The judge took no account of this risk. The board is very mindful of the serious consequences which may flow from having to discharge a jury shortly before the end of a long and complex criminal trial. It is also very conscious of the danger of deliberate attempts to derail criminal trials by engineering situations in which it is necessary to discharge the jury. In England and Wales, there is legislation which allows a judge in certain situations to discharge a jury because of jury tampering and to continue the trial by judge alone. There is no such legislation in Jamaica. It follows that there will be occasions where, as in this case, a court will have no alternative but to discharge a jury and end the trial in order to protect the integrity of the system of trial by jury. In view of its conclusion on the issue of juror misconduct, the board holds that it is not necessary to express a concluded view on the other two grounds of appeal. For these reasons, the appellant's appeals should be allowed. The court is now adjourned.
Once again, you have yourself legally. Vybz Kartel and his co-defendants are free of the conviction. Because I don't want to confuse you, I will wait for context matters later on rather. He's somewhere in London here. I'll wait for context matters to explain the technicality of the remittal and Vybz Kartel release. But I would lean on the part that it would be an automatical release pending the question to the appeals court. Murdo, welcome. Global TV continue to grow. While we are in broadcast, Global TV has 1, received its first super chat, and 2, its first membership. We have received our first super chat from Noel Williams. Thank you very much, bro. Thanks for your continuous support to the channel. And we have also received our first membership from our North American correspondent and one of our moderators, Debbie Jervis. And I want to say to you both, thank you very much for your support to the whole global television experience. Good evening, Gigi Wilkie. Good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining Global Television. Cheryl Williams, good evening and welcome. Thank you all for joining. Conchigal for 84, good evening. Good evening and welcome. Thank you all for being a part of the Global TV family. Dorothy Brown, good evening and welcome. And the Global TV experience, even though we had a little dodginess on the link. Joy Johnson, good evening and welcome. On the link, Natalia Freeman, good evening and welcome, and thank you for the super chat. Natalia Freeman is one of our avid Global TV supporters. Thank you very much for your support. And I have no doubt this evening, Nicola Pitt, good evening, Kenroy Thompson, good evening and welcome. I have no doubt this evening that Context Matters will be giving further explanation in context to the Daniel Ndogi, good evening. Dondu, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, yes, good evening. So we have seen today that our corrupt justice system has failed, 1, to protect broad-scale justice, and 2, is willing to corrupt justice in order to achieve their aim. The Privy Council said this cannot stand. And we have seen this evening the Jamaican justice system has received a slap in the face and will have to answer the very difficult question. Do we have enough evidence, Garth Williams? Good evening. Do we have enough evidence? Carl Sexy Sade, good evening and welcome. Do we have enough evidence to embark on a retrial to secure, one, a safe conviction, and in public interest? Can the Jamaica Appeal Court answer that question successfully, Charmin Minto? Can the Jamaican justice system answer that question successfully? And should Paula Llewellyn be the one to head that case? Should Paula Llewellyn go further as our prosecutor after this embarrassment we've had in our justice system this evening? A fragrant slapdown. David, good evening and welcome. A slapdown from the justices of the Privy Council. Can Paula continue? Kino Rowe, good evening and welcome. Thank you for joining us. Can Paula Llewellyn continue at the head of our prosecutorial service, given that she has gotten it so wrong with but evidence? Kevin Wright, good evening and welcome. Given that the DPP has gotten it so wrong, messy, when it comes to the evidential gathering which was put forward to her, which she proceeded with to trial. Given that the DPP was summoned to court for her opinion and the whole juror debacle issue, can Paula Llewellyn, should Paula Llewellyn continue leading the Department of Prosecution? Can Paula Llewellyn, should Paula Llewellyn, Peggy Reed, continue to lead our Department of Prosecution? And will Jamaicans' voice, will Jamaican voice at home and abroad be quiet and silent to this flagrant abuse of justice, this flagrant abuses of our constitutional rights, given that more and more we see a breakdown in our constitutional framework? Is Jamaica ready to go the route of republic before we clean up this mammoth cycle of corruption that our justice system is? I want to thank you all very much for being with us here this evening on Global Television. Context Matter comes on 5 o'clock your Eastern time, 10 o'clock my time. And I have no doubt that Isaac Buchanan, the new Jamaican Johnny Cochran, will give clarity to the technicality of the remittal of the question and whether it affects the release of Vybz Kartel and his co-defendant. I don't want to confuse you on that question because I cannot answer it from my knowledge at the moment, and I'll allow Counsel Buchanan to lead on that explanation. Thank you very much for being here with Global TV this evening. Thanks to all our new subscribers who has become a part of the Global Television family this evening. Thanks to my moderator for my first membership, and to Noel Williams and Natalia Freeman for our first Global TV Super Chat. This was our special broadcast in Vybz Kartel and Others versus the King. This was Global Television. Thank you for joining us this evening, and we will definitely see you back later. We might come back a bit late because I'm going to be over by Context Matters tonight, listening to the breakdown of explanation to what we see unfold today on the implications. Counsel will be able to give us more on that, the implications that will be coming out of this ruling, and answer the question as to the technicalities of the remittal of the question to the Privy Council. Anthony Campbell, good evening. Thank you all very much for being here with us on Global Television this evening. We hope you can join us right back here tonight around 11:30 midnight, so-ish, because I want to listen to Isaac's breakdown of what happened. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and we appreciate your company and your support, and we look forward to see you back tonight and every time you hear the ping when we're ready to go live. Thank you very much. This was Global Television.
Yeah.